The MiG-29 shuddered, metal groaned, outside a tempest raged.
Captain Sergei Ivanovich gripped the controls, his knuckles white, his heart a drum against his ribs. This was no ordinary turbulence. This was a dance with death.
Sergei had flown through storms before. He was a veteran of the Russian skies, with years etched on his face and in the lines around his eyes. But this felt different.
A cold dread seeped into him, as icy as the winds that buffeted his aircraft. Below him, the Siberian wilderness stretched, a vast and unforgiving expanse. If he went down, there would be no mayday call, no rescue beacon, only the endless white silence.
Fear, raw and primal, threatened to consume him. Then a memory surfaced, unbidden but welcome. His grandmother, whispering prayers in their small wooden house. Her voice, soft yet resolute, had always been a source of comfort.
A sense of calm amidst the storm of his thoughts. It was as if her prayers had reached across time and space to touch him. Could there be solace in something he'd always dismissed? The idea seemed foreign, yet strangely comforting. Sergei wasn't a religious man. He had always relied on his training, his skills, and the science that governed flight. He lived by logic, by the cold equations of thrust and drag, lift and gravity. These were the constants in his life, the unchanging truths. But what use were equations against the raw power of nature? The storm outside was a reminder of the limits of human control.
He closed his eyes for a moment, a single desperate prayer escaping his lips. Help me. It was a plea born of desperation, a cry for something greater than himself.
It was a whisper lost in the roar of the wind, a sound swallowed by the chaos around him. But it felt as if a weight had lifted from his chest. The act of praying, of reaching out, had brought an unexpected sense of relief. He opened his eyes, his focus returning to the instruments before him. The storm was still there, but so was a newfound resolve. He would face it, not just with his skills, but with a heart that had found a whisper of hope. A glint of light caught his eye. It was from the cabin, a faint reflection. He squinted. A passenger seated calmly, reading, praying.
The man was in seat 23A. Sergei had noticed him earlier, a man with a serene face framed by a neatly trimmed beard. He seemed unperturbed by the chaos around him, his lips moving silently in prayer.
Anger flared within Sergei. How could anyone be so calm? Didn't he understand the gravity of their situation? They were hurtling towards the earth, and this man was praying.
But as quickly as it came, the anger subsided. It was replaced by a strange curiosity. What did this man possess that he didn't?
The turbulence reached a crescendo. The MiG-29 lurched violently. Warning lights flashed on the instrument panel. Engine failure. Sergei's heart sank. This was it. He closed his eyes, bracing for the inevitable.
But instead of the sickening crunch of metal, he heard a deafening roar. He opened his eyes. The engine indicators flickered, then stabilized. The roar was the sound of the engines, struggling, but alive. The plane was climbing, slowly but surely, pulling away from the storm.
He had made it. They had made it. He looked back at seat 23A. The man was still praying, a serene smile on his face. Was it a coincidence, or something more?
The incident shook me to my core. I had stared death in the face and lived to tell the tale. But it was the man in seat 23A, his calm amidst the storm, that haunted me. I couldn't shake off the feeling that I had witnessed something miraculous. But miracles didn't exist, did they? Not in my world of logic and reason.
Sergei began to research. He read about different religions, searching for answers. He visited churches, synagogues, and temples, hoping to find something that resonated with him.
But it was a chance encounter with a group of Muslims at a local mosque that changed everything. Years later, as a seasoned pilot for a commercial airline, I found myself in a familiar yet vastly different setting. The hum of the engines, the array of controls, and the vast expanse of sky before me were all elements I had grown accustomed to over the years. I found myself flying over the Caucasus Mountains, a region that held a special place in my heart. The rugged peaks and deep valleys below were a stark reminder of my past, a past filled with both challenges and triumphs. The familiar landscape brought back memories of that fateful day in the MiG-29. It was a day that had changed the course of my life, a day that had tested my limits and ultimately led me to where I am now. I looked at my co-pilot, a young man barely old enough to shave. His eyes were wide with a mixture of excitement and apprehension, a look I remembered well from my own early days in the cockpit. I saw the fear in his eyes as the plane hit a patch of turbulence. The sudden jolt and the shaking of the aircraft were enough to unsettle even the most seasoned of pilots, let alone someone so new to the profession. I smiled, a knowing smile. It was a smile that conveyed not just reassurance, but also a deep understanding of what he was feeling. I had been in his shoes once, and I knew that with time and experience, he would learn to handle these situations with the same calm demeanor. "Don't worry," I said, my voice calm and reassuring. "This is just a part of the journey. Every pilot goes through it, and it's these moments that make us stronger and more capable. Sometimes, the greatest storms lead us to the safest harbors." It's a lesson I've learned time and time again, both in the air and in life. The turbulence we face often guides us to a place of greater understanding and peace.
As I reflected on these thoughts, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the experiences that had shaped me, for the challenges that had made me stronger, and for the journey that had brought me to this moment.
As the call to prayer echoed through the cockpit, a sound Sergei had downloaded onto the plane's system. It served as a reminder of the spiritual journey I had undertaken. The call to prayer was more than just a sound. It was a symbol of faith, hope, and resilience. He closed his eyes and offered a silent prayer of thanks. Thanks for the journey, for the lessons learned, and for the strength to face whatever lay ahead. Thanks for the storm that led him to his faith. It was in the midst of the storm that he had found his true calling, a calling that had brought him peace and purpose. Word of Sergei's conversion and his story spread far and wide, reaching corners of the world he never imagined. His tale of transformation resonated deeply with many. He received letters and emails from people all over the world, each message a testament to the impact of his journey. The sheer volume of correspondence was overwhelming, yet heartwarming. People thanked him for sharing his experience, expressing how his story had inspired them, given them hope, or even prompted them to explore their own spiritual paths. Among the myriad of letters, one stood out. It was not just the words, but the depth of emotion and shared experience that made it special. It was from a man named Ivan Petrov, whose words carried the weight of a profound personal journey. Ivan was a former military pilot who had also experienced a life-changing event in the air. His story was one of courage, fear, and ultimately, faith. Ivan's story was eerily similar to Sergei's. Both men had faced the brink of death, and both had found a new path in the aftermath. Ivan, too, had faced a near-death experience while flying, a moment that changed his life forever. The tension, the fear, and the subsequent relief were all too familiar to Sergei. In the wake of his ordeal, Ivan found solace and guidance in Islam, just as Sergei had. Their shared experiences created an instant bond, a connection that transcended their individual stories. They decided to meet, two souls brought together by fate and faith. Their first meeting was filled with emotion, as if they had known each other for years.
Their bond deepened over time, and they decided to embark on a pilgrimage to Mecca together, a journey that symbolized their shared faith and newfound brotherhood. The journey to Mecca was more than just a physical trip. It was a spiritual odyssey, a quest for deeper understanding and connection. The anticipation and excitement were palpable. As they stood side by side in the Grand Mosque, the culmination of their pilgrimage, they felt a profound sense of achievement and spiritual fulfillment. Surrounded by millions of other Muslims, each on their own spiritual journey, they felt a deep connection to the global community of believers. In that sacred space, they experienced an overwhelming sense of peace and belonging, a feeling that their journeys, both individual and shared, had led them to this moment of unity and faith.
Their stories serve as a powerful reminder that faith can be found in the most unexpected places, even amidst the chaos of a storm. They teach us that sometimes we need to lose ourselves in order to find our true path. For Sergei and Ivan, the sky wasn't just their workplace. It was where their faith took flight. Their stories are a testament to the power of the human spirit and the enduring strength of faith, proving that even in the darkest of times, a single prayer can illuminate the path. Ivan Petrov knew the sky like the back of his hand. 20 years in the Russian Air Force had honed his skills to a razor's edge. He was a man of discipline, a man of action, a decorated pilot who had stared danger in the face countless times. From the frozen tundra of Siberia to the sun-baked plains of the Middle East, Ivan had flown missions that tested the limits of man and machine. He was a soldier, through and through, his loyalty to his country unwavering. Yet, beneath the surface of the hardened warrior, a seed of discontent had begun to sprout. Ivan had always believed in duty, in honor, in serving something greater than himself. But as the years turned into decades, a nagging emptiness began to creep into his soul. He had flown countless missions, executed countless maneuvers, but the thrill of the skies had begun to lose its luster. The medals on his chest, once symbols of pride, now felt like heavy weights. What was it all for, he wondered? This life lived on the edge of a knife? What purpose did it serve? The world saw Ivan Petrov as a hero, a symbol of strength and courage. But Ivan saw himself as a man adrift, searching for an anchor in a vast and turbulent sea. Little did he know that his search for meaning would lead him not across the boundless sky, but to a remote desert village where fate had a life-altering encounter in store for him. An encounter that would challenge his beliefs, shake him to his core, and ultimately lead him to a place of peace he never thought possible. The mission was routine, a simple reconnaissance flight over a war-torn region of the Middle East. Ivan had been on countless missions like this before, each one blending into the next, a blur of desert landscapes and military objectives. Ivan had flown countless missions like it before, his senses alert, his mind focused. He was a seasoned pilot, well versed in the art of navigating hostile skies. Every mission demanded his full attention, and he was always ready to deliver. Yet, there was an unsettling feeling in the pit of his stomach, a premonition that this flight would be different. It was a nagging sensation, one that he couldn't quite place, but it gnawed at him nonetheless. As he soared through the cloudless sky, the sun beating down on the cockpit, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. The clear blue expanse seemed almost too serene, a deceptive calm before an impending storm. Suddenly, the world around him dissolved into chaos. The tranquility of the sky was shattered in an instant, replaced by a cacophony of alarms and the violent shuddering of the aircraft. A deafening roar split the air as a plume of black smoke erupted from the engine of his jet. The once reliable machine was now a crippled beast, struggling to stay aloft. Warning lights flashed angrily on the instrument panel, their shrill beeps a terrifying symphony of impending doom. Each light was a harbinger of disaster, each beep a countdown to catastrophe. Ivan fought to control the plummeting aircraft, his heart pounding against his ribs. His training kicked in, every muscle and nerve working in unison to wrestle the jet back under control. He knew the odds were stacked against him, yet he refused to give in. Determination etched on his face, he battled the controls, refusing to let fate dictate his end. With a deafening crunch and a spray of sand, Ivan crash-landed on the outskirts of a small village. The impact was jarring, the force of it rattling his bones and leaving him momentarily stunned. He stumbled out of the wreckage, dazed and disoriented, his ears ringing. The world around him was a blur, the once familiar landscape now a disorienting maze of sand and debris. The desert sun beat down on him mercilessly as he surveyed his surroundings. The heat was oppressive, each breath a struggle against the dry, scorching air. A sea of sand stretched out in every direction, broken only by the occasional scrub bush and the distant silhouette of dunes. The vastness of the desert was overwhelming, a stark reminder of his isolation. He was stranded, alone, in a land as foreign to him as the surface of the moon. The realization hit him hard, a wave of despair washing over him. As the initial shock began to wear off, despair threatened to engulf Ivan. The enormity of his situation was almost too much to bear, the weight of it pressing down on him like a physical force. He was injured, alone, and stranded in a hostile land. His body ached from the crash, each movement a painful reminder of his predicament. His training had prepared him for many things, but nothing could have prepared him for this. The desert was an unforgiving adversary, one that required more than just skill and determination to survive. As he looked out at the unforgiving desert landscape, a single thought echoed through his mind. This is it. This is where it ends. The finality of it was sobering, a stark contrast to the adrenaline-fueled chaos of the crash. Little did he know, however, that his journey was far from over. The desert held secrets, challenges, and perhaps even allies that he had yet to discover. In fact, it was just beginning. Ivan's resolve hardened as he realized that survival was not just about enduring, but about fighting back, adapting, and overcoming the odds. The sound of approaching voices stirred Ivan from his despair. He looked up to see a group of men approaching, their faces etched with concern. They were dressed in traditional robes, their language unfamiliar. Fear gripped Ivan's heart. Were these men friend or foe? Would they help him or harm him? He was injured, alone, and at their mercy. To Ivan's surprise, the men greeted him with kindness. They spoke in broken Russian, explaining that they had seen his plane go down and had come to help. They were villagers from a nearby settlement, a place untouched by the ravages of war. With gentle hands, they lifted Ivan and carried him towards their village, their faces a mixture of curiosity and compassion. The village was a small cluster of mud brick houses nestled around a central well. The air was filled with the sounds of children playing and the scent of spices carried on the breeze. The villagers, despite their own hardships, welcomed Ivan with open arms. They treated his injuries, offered him food and water, and gave him a place to rest. Their hospitality, so freely given, touched Ivan deeply. Among the villagers was a man named Abdul Rahman, the village imam. Abdul was a man of deep faith and wisdom, his eyes reflecting a lifetime spent in contemplation and prayer. He saw in Ivan not a stranger, but a fellow traveler on life's journey. He sensed the turmoil in Ivan's heart, the emptiness that gnawed at his soul, and he felt compelled to help him find peace. The days that followed passed in a blur of unfamiliar sights and sounds. Ivan found himself in a world that was both alien and fascinating, filled with vibrant colors, bustling markets, and the hum of daily life. Every corner of the village seemed to hold a new discovery, a new story waiting to be told. Ivan, still weak from his injuries, found himself drawn to Abdul's gentle wisdom. The older man had a calming presence that seemed to ease Ivan's troubled mind. Despite the language barrier, they communicated through gestures, expressions, and the occasional translated word. They would sit together for hours, talking about life, loss, and the search for meaning. Abdul's stories were filled with lessons and parables that resonated deeply with Ivan, who was searching for answers to questions he hadn't even realized he was asking. Abdul spoke of Allah's mercy, of the importance of faith and the power of prayer. His words were not just teachings, but a way of life, a philosophy that guided every action and decision. Ivan listened intently, his skepticism slowly giving way to curiosity. He found himself questioning his own beliefs and the rigid logic he had always relied on. One evening, as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the village, Ivan heard the call to prayer for the first time. The sound was unlike anything he had ever heard, a haunting melody that seemed to transcend time and space. The mournful cry of the muezzin echoed through the air, a haunting melody that seemed to reach into the depths of his soul. It was a call not just to prayer, but to reflection, to a moment of stillness in the midst of chaos. He watched as the villagers, their faces serene, laid out their prayer rugs and turned towards Mecca. There was a sense of purpose and unity in their actions, a collective devotion that was both humbling and inspiring. There was a sense of peace and unity in their movements that Ivan had never experienced before. It was as if the act of praying together created an invisible bond, a shared connection that transcended individual differences. Intrigued, Ivan asked Abdul about the meaning of the prayer. He wanted to understand the significance behind the rituals, the deeper purpose that drove the villagers to such devotion. Abdul explained that Muslims pray 5 times a day, offering their gratitude to Allah and seeking His guidance. Each prayer was a moment to pause, to reflect, and to reconnect with their faith. He spoke of the importance of submitting to God's will and finding solace in His love. It was a concept that was both foreign and comforting to Ivan, who had always relied on his own strength and intellect. Ivan listened intently, his heart stirring with a strange mix of emotions. He felt a sense of longing, a desire to understand and to belong. He had always considered himself a man of logic and reason, yet there was something about the simplicity and sincerity of Islam that resonated with him. It was a faith that embraced both the mind and the heart, offering a path to inner peace. As the days turned into weeks, Ivan found himself drawn more and more to the rhythm of life in the village. He began to appreciate the slower pace, the sense of community, and the deep-rooted traditions that shaped their daily lives. He began to join Abdul for prayers, his initial awkwardness giving way to a sense of peace he had never known before. The act of praying became a moment of solace, a time to quiet his mind and open his heart. The words of the Quran, though unfamiliar, stirred something deep within him. He found himself drawn to its teachings, its stories, and its message of compassion and justice. He found himself captivated by the stories of the prophets, the emphasis on compassion and charity, and the message of surrender to a higher power. It was a journey of discovery, a path that led him to question, to learn, and to grow. The holy month of Ramadan arrived, casting a spiritual shadow over the desert village, enveloping it in a sense of sacredness and reflection. Ivan observed as the villagers, including Abdul, abstained from food and drink from dawn till dusk, a practice that seemed both challenging and enlightening. He was amazed by their unwavering devotion, their resilience in the face of physical hardship, and their ability to find strength in their faith. He witnessed firsthand the spirit of generosity and community that Ramadan fostered as families shared their meager meals and offered prayers together, creating bonds that transcended material wealth. One evening, as the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Ivan found himself sitting next to Abdul, breaking the fast with dates and water, a simple yet profound ritual. He had never felt so connected to a group of people before, so accepted and loved, as if he had found a long-lost family in this distant land. He realized that the emptiness he had felt for so long wasn't a void in his life, but a void in his spirit, a yearning for deeper meaning and connection. It was a longing for something to believe in, something to give him purpose, a guiding light in the darkness of uncertainty. Abdul, Ivan began, his voice filled with emotion. I've been thinking a lot about your faith, about Islam, and the peace it seems to bring to everyone here. The more I learn, the more I realize how much I don't know, how much there is to discover and understand. Abdul smiled gently, his eyes twinkling with understanding, as if he had heard these words many times before from seekers of truth. Faith is a journey, Ivan, he replied, not a destination. It's a path we walk every day, learning and growing with each step. The most important step is the first one, the decision to embark on this journey with an open heart and mind. That night, as Ivan lay on his mat, listening to the soft murmur of prayers coming from the mosque, he felt a profound sense of peace wash over him, a tranquility he had never known before. He had spent his life searching for meaning, for something to fill the void within him, a quest that had taken him to many places and experiences. He had sought it in the thrill of flight, in the camaraderie of his fellow soldiers, but it had always eluded him, leaving him with a sense of incompleteness. Now, in this remote desert village, surrounded by people of a different faith, he had found it. He had found a sense of belonging, a sense of purpose, and most importantly, a sense of